Hello everyone. Now you will hear a brief retelling of the movie The Day the Earth Stood Still. Enjoy the movie. A climber is camping in the Indian Karakoram Mountains in 1928. When he chooses to investigate the strange glowing object that has suddenly appeared outside his tent, he finds that it is a massive light ball that is just slightly coated in ice. The man looks at it in amazement for a minute before attempting to strike it with his pickaxe. As the sphere begins to light brighter, he falls and passes out. A few seconds later, he wakes up to find the sphere gone and an odd-looking scar on his body. Years go by, and 2008 arrives. After teaching at Princeton University, Helen, an astrobiologist, returns home to be with her stepson, Jacob. Even though the youngster hasn't spoken to Helen since his father passed away, Helen still loves him very much. Helen receives a call out of the blue from an anonymous caller informing her that an automobile is headed her way. Helen receives a tap on the door from an FBI agent telling her to come with them immediately as the police surround the house. Fortunately, the neighbor shows up to check what's going on and allows Helen to leave Jacob with her. He refuses to say anything, and Helen doesn't want to leave Jacob alone. Helen is then driven away, but the FBI officers continue to fail to respond to her inquiries. After some time, they reach an airstrip where Helen boards a helicopter with many scientists, including a civil engineer and a nuclear physicist. All of these scientists were abducted from their homes without cause, much like Helen. When the company arrives to Linwood Military Academy in New Jersey a short while later, the military requests that everyone leave their cell phones at the door. Since Helen works with a well-known physician named Carl, her old buddy Michael put her on the vital list. Helen moves rapidly to hide her phone beneath her clothes before Michael takes her away. Michael then calls a meeting of all the scientists to give a presentation on the state of affairs. It turns out that an unknown space object is traveling in an unusual direction toward Earth, and based on their first estimates, the object will undoubtedly crash with the globe. Since it cannot be shot down due to its extreme speed, the government has formed an emergency reaction team to handle the fallout from this disaster. Before the celestial object falls on Manhattan and kills almost 8 million people, the crew is just over an hour. Following the meeting, Helen locks herself in the restroom in order to contact Jacob and inform him to hide in the basement, but she withholds the specifics from him. One of the soldiers overhears her discussion, but rather than being taken into custody, she requests to borrow the phone so she may contact her family as well. The scientists then proceed to the crash site, where they are immediately startled by the unidentifiable item and the stopped rocket launch system. Fearful, they clasp hands and count down the final moments, but to their surprise, nothing occurs. At that time, they observe a dazzling ball of light coming toward Earth slowly through the window. When it falls in the center of Central Park, people flee in fear. The scientists sense something in the air, maybe electromagnetic radiation, so they quickly put on protective suits and approach the luminous sphere with caution. A light starts to glow brilliantly on the sphere as an extraterrestrial creature appears to greet the police and military, who soon arrive with guns and surround the place. The extraterrestrial approaches Helen gently and reaches out to shake hands. As she reaches back, a shot is fired and the alien, who is obviously wounded, falls into her arms. Abruptly, a massive being materializes from the darkness, utilizing its abilities to deplete the local electricity supply and render all equipment inoperable. Its dreadful ultrasonic noise also leaves everyone stunned. The thing then lunges for the injured alien, but the alien just gestures for it to stop, and the robot instantly turns off so that the machinery may resume as usual. The injured alien is then brought to a military laboratory, where the physicians are unable to cure the unidentified species and waste so much time that the alien's condition deteriorates. Helen suggests that they consult a surgeon to remove the bullet, and that is precisely what they do. The surgeon cuts into the wound and extracts the bullet with ease, but he's also taken aback by how human-like the alien within looks. In addition, he observes that the gray tissue resembling skin is breaking off from the alien's torso, so he removes the entire layer. To the surprise of everybody, the surviving organism resembles a human. The extraterrestrial is then placed in a unique protective capsule and his condition is kept track of. The alien wakes up and panics as soon as he sees the capsule when Helen realizes he is dreaming. Helen speaks to him in a kind tone, assuring him that there is no threat. The extraterrestrial becomes calmer as it is shown that he resembles the 1928 mountaineer perfectly. He simply repeats what Helen says at this point, refusing to respond to inquiries. Humanity is currently experiencing instability and fear. Exchanges for stocks are closing, and residents of New York are getting ready for an immediate evacuation. Fearing an extraterrestrial invasion, people are also leaving population centers on their own around the planet. The Secretary of Defense Regina calls an emergency meeting and finds out that the aliens have hacked into one of the surveillance satellites, giving them access to all the confidential information regarding national defenses, while the President and Vice President are holed up in a shelter. More of these luminous spheres are falling all over the Earth, which exacerbates the situation. Regina hears the scientists' findings upon arriving at the lab. DNA from 3 distinct life forms was found in the aliens' body samples. The gray flesh shell, which resembles a placenta's protective garment, is biological, but the creature's bodily components are human. The mountaineer scar and the aliens' ability to assume human form can be explained by the possibility that the aliens visited Earth earlier and collected a sample of human DNA. The gang then pays the extraterrestrial a visit. He speaks flawless English and requests water. It will take some time for him to adjust to this body, he says, shaking his hand as he raises the glass to his mouth. When Regina tries to question the extraterrestrial, her inquiries are not answered. The extraterrestrial then reveals himself as Klaatu and claims to be a representative of a collection of civilizations in response to Helen's question about telling her about himself. Regina declines his request for a special UN meeting so he may speak with all of the world's leaders. Regina gives the order to inject Klaatu with truth serum and transfer him to a secure facility for questioning as he refuses to provide any further information. Although Regina feels that Klaatu poses a serious threat to mankind and should be within the Secretary of Defense's purview, the scientists consider Klaatu to be the greatest discovery in human history and do not want to give him over to the Secret Service. Helen intervenes during Michael and Regina's fight, telling them she would personally inject the alien and do all the tests. Helen is then handed a bottle of truth serum, but she enters the pharmacy covertly and steals a vial of ordinary saline as well. When Klaatu claims he plans to escape, Regina tells him she won't allow him since he has unlawfully invaded our planet and his enormous robot has attacked the troops. Meanwhile, Regina tells Klaatu that he will be moved to a more secure facility. Helen is told to give the injection by Regina, despite Klaatu's warning that the biorobot only activates when there is violence. Helen whispers to him that he has to run and gives him the saline instead of the serum. Helen is then taken away right away, and Klaatu is restrained to a chair before being brought to a lie detector room where he answers a series of control questions while a monitor shows his readings. Only a few evasive responses are given by Klaatu before he utilizes his abilities to electrocute the agent and reprogram the lie detector. Subsequently, Klaatu assumes mental control of the guy, instructing him to give him the suit and asking how to escape the military installation. Subsequently, Klaatu employs his abilities to seize command of the security cameras and locates each guard, enabling him to utilize ultrasound to paralyze them all. When the alarm goes off, Klaatu quietly exits the building while everyone else panics and rushes about. When Helen takes a sample of the alien's flesh in the midst of the confusion, Regina gives the order to utilize whatever tool at hand to apprehend the runaway. When Klaatu eventually makes it to the train station, the several cancelled departures have similarly caused total mayhem there. Due to the fact that he has human parts, Klaatu experiences hunger. As a child looks on in wonder, he utilizes his abilities to grab a free meal from a vending machine. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Klaatu observes how society acts, noting how irrationally irritated everyone becomes when they have to wait. He feels sick out of the blue and runs to the bathroom, where he finds himself bleeding and collapses. Helen receives a call at home a few seconds later informing her that a patient has asked for her at the station. Helen knows right away that it had to be the extraterrestrial, so she drives over to the station to get him. After that, she leads Klaatu to her car, where he encounters an obnoxious-looking Jacob. After Klaatu begs Helen for a sample of the gray tissue that was extracted from him, the wound heals instantaneously when he dabs the sample on it. In the meanwhile, the biorobot, which senses impending danger and activates instantly, is targeted by the US military. Its abilities enable it to quickly seize control of any military hardware and destroy it in a matter of seconds. After every attempt to assault the extraterrestrial is unsuccessful, the military officials are at a loss on what to do. Returning to Helen, she follows Klaatu's instructions and drives along a certain path. When Jacob sees all the vehicles attempting to flee the city, he declares his hatred for aliens, claiming that they deserve to be eliminated and that, had he been alive, his father would have engaged in combat with them. When the group finally reaches their location, Klaatu questions Helen about his family while Jacob uses the restroom. It comes out that the boy's mother died giving birth, and his father was a military engineer. After Helen wed Jacob's father, who also passed away, Helen is now responsible for Jacob. After that, the group walks into a fast food restaurant where Klaatu meets Mr. Wu, another extraterrestrial who came to Earth 70 years ago to study humans. Wu is also an alien who assumed a human shape. After Mr. Wu explains that he has discovered people to be destructive, unyielding, and unable to change, Klaatu nods in agreement and orders Mr. Wu to go so he may carry out the procedure. Nevertheless, Mr. Wu plans to remain on Earth since, while conducting his studies, he witnessed both wonderful and awful things. Additionally, he wants to spend his final moments with his own family. Meanwhile, the military erects incredibly sturdy defenses around the dormant massive biorobot in the hopes of obstructing its abilities. The extraterrestrial is formally presented as a wanted criminal since their emergency hotline is overflowing with hundreds of calls from individuals reporting sightings of Klaatu. Now, returning to the trio, they are traveling to New Jersey. Helen urges Jacob to wait while she follows Klaatu, who requests to stop the car and head back into the woods. A swarm of strange insects rushes past her as she enters the woods, and she follows them to a lake where Klaatu sits gazing out to sea. When another luminous orb abruptly appears from the lake, Klaatu triggers the emergence process, turning on every extraterrestrial sphere that has touched down on Earth. When Helen, taken aback, gets back in the car, Jacob senses something is off. He thinks Helen will wed Klaatu and he will succeed him as father, but he ignores Helen's denial and flees into the forest. Helen follows him, and both of them see a brilliant beam of light amid the trees at that very moment. It's the luminous sphere that, together with the others, is now departing the planet. The sphere that Klaatu arrived in is the sole sphere that is still on Earth. In any case, Klaatu tells Helen to bring him back to the city once he returns from the jungle, but Helen won't assist him unless she receives an explanation. As there aren't many planets in the cosmos where sophisticated biological beings may survive, Klaatu informs her that people are ruining Earth. He has come to save Earth from the humans because he thinks the planet can be reborn if all human encroachment is eradicated. After witnessing mankind for years and not seeing any change, Helen is horrified and attempts to persuade Klaatu that people can change and that they should be given another opportunity. However, Klaatu doesn't think Helen is sincere, and the issue has now reached a critical point. Furthermore, there is nothing that can be done as the procedure has already started. A policeman drives by at that same time and stops when he spots the wanted man. As he draws his revolver and demands they surrender, Jacob begs Klaatu to spare the police officer. But Klaatu assures him that the anguish will pass, and with a wave of his hand, he crushes the policeman by pushing Helen's car towards him. Jacob panics, but Klaatu uses the car's energy like a defibrillator to instantly attach his abilities to it and resuscitate the officer. Klaatu clarifies that his intention was to remove a momentary hurdle rather than to do harm to the guy. Helen suggests taking Klaatu to see a man who could persuade him to reconsider his mind, as she still believes that he has the ability to halt everything if he so chooses. The secret agencies are investigating the different spheres that have departed Earth in the meantime. They learn through video recordings that several species of Earth organisms are being transported into space by the light orbs. Regina understands that a flood is about to occur since the spheres resemble Noah's Ark. As the biorobot is being positioned by the military in a deep subterranean silo, protests and increased looting occur worldwide. Returning to Helen, she takes Klaatu to visit Carl, the scientist she collaborated with who won the Nobel Prize. When Klaatu chooses to finish a formula he discovers on a board, Carl immediately jumps in to help him finish the challenge. Carl may now assume Klaatu is the sought-after extraterrestrial. Jacob is watching television in another room when he notices the hotline number that should be called if anyone spots Klaatu. Carl asks Klaatu in the living room how his society survived, and he replies that they had to develop since their sun had started to go out. Carl notes that in that instance, change occurs when a species is in danger of going extinct, and since humans are now in that situation, they ought to be granted further time. This gives Klaatu a lot to ponder, but just as they are talking, Air Force helicopters fly above. In a rush, Klaatu, Helen, and Jacob depart Carl's residence, and Carl instructs Helene to persuade the alien to alter her views by deeds rather than words. The three of them attempt to hide in the woods from the military, but Jacob emerges into a clearing and starts to scream out to the helicopters, flailing his arms and shouting. Later, he admits to Helen that he called because it is what his father would have done. The kid cries more when a distraught Helen attempts to tell him that his father is no longer with him. Helen is abruptly taken by one of the helicopters, which takes off right away. When the other two helicopters see Klaatu, they get ready to start shooting, but Klaatu uses his abilities to shock the pilots and cause the aircraft to collide. Fearful Jacob flees into the woods, but Klaatu finds him in time to save him from plunging into the river by rapid reflex. The child is then persuaded to follow Klaatu. Soon after, Helen approaches Regina and begs her to let her leave, saying that Klaatu listens to her and that she is the only one who can stop him. However, Regina declines. In the meanwhile, the military base's special troops are testing the enormous biorobot. When they attempt to penetrate its armor, the diamond drill breaks. Strange creatures are growing crazily fast inside the fractured drill's crevices and devouring the tool while the operator reaches for another. The enormous robot abruptly starts to break up into small particles, which reveal themselves to be bug-like nanorobots that start eating everything in their immediate environment. Some of the guys try to get out while the windows break, but they are stuck within the sealed base and have to wait. Before long, the base is destroyed and everyone is reduced to dust. The military informs Regina of the situation and states that it is not feasible to kill the nanorobots. Now that the alien bugs have broken out, they have created a massive cloud that travels in all directions and obliterates everything in its path. The missiles fired at them have only served to boost their population. When the bugs get to a stadium this size, it quickly becomes dust. When Regina finally realizes there is nothing more they can do, she releases Helen, and Michael will accompany her to speak with Klaatu. Jacob is led by Klaatu to a woodsman's cottage in the wilderness, where he is given permission to contact Helen's cell phone. After deciding on a secure meeting spot, Jacob and Klaatu begin leaving, and Jacob says he no longer wants Klaatu to die. Klaatu begins to doubt his views about the nature of humanity as a result of this. When they finally reach Jacob's father's grave in the cemetery a short while later, he begs Klaatu to utilize his resurrection ability just as he did with the patrolman. But Klaatu's abilities are limited, and he cannot cure a rotting corpse. In a fit of rage, Jacob orders Klaatu to go, but Helen appears and rushes over to give the youngster a firm embrace in an attempt to console him. At last, Jacob accepts the loss of his father, and he and Helen make amends to one another for their previous actions, resolving to act like a real family moving forward. Klaatu is persuaded that there is good in people and that they should be given another opportunity after seeing such a touching incident. Klaatu observes the nanorobots and resolves to attempt to stop them when Helen pledges that they will change who they are and how they live. New York City is rapidly being overtaken by a swarm of nanobots that are consuming everything in their path, including people, buildings, and automobiles. Regina explains to the U.S. president that diplomatic talks are being used to try to find a solution. But out of desperation, the president gives her the order to start using force again. Michael, Klaatu, Jacob, Helen, and the remaining sphere run back to New York. Except for the troops barricading the highways, every street is deserted, yet Klaatu forces Michael to drive straight past them. The troops first start pursuing them, but they quickly get instructions to hold back. When the gang arrives at Central Park a short while later, they are shocked to discover that the scientists and soldiers have vanished. The president orders the Air Force to attack the area, and that's when the automobile flips and crashes and a massive fire starts to burn through the park. Sadly, Michael passes away, but the others survive. When the nanorobots get there, they start to break apart the automobile, so Klaatu removes Jacob and Helen with the intention of getting to the sphere. However, the trio must flee to hide beneath a bridge since the insect cloud has now encircled the globe and covered the sky. Abruptly, Helen's nose starts to run, and Jacob passes out as his nose starts to bleed. Helen begs Klaatu for assistance, explaining that they are slowly being eaten alive by the bugs inside of them. Grabbing their hands, the alien uses his powers to force the bugs out of their bodies and into his own. As Jacob awakens, Klaatu affirms Carl was correct. Humans may transform when they are on the verge of an abyss. Once Klaatu has bid farewell to the family, he exits the house and makes his way cautiously through the cluster of nanorobots until he arrives at the sphere. When he touches the luminous ball, all of the nanobots are destroyed along with his body collapsing. As the dead bugs scatter throughout the earth, all technology malfunctions and cities fall into complete darkness, the price mankind must pay for the damage they have caused to the planet. When Jacob and Helen emerge to see the luminous sphere leave their planet, Jacob makes a suggestion that Klaatu's essence is still present.